Christians hate change. Let me tell you something. We have traditional church services, we have traditional music, we have traditional lives. And there are important principles that shouldn't change, you know, important biblical principles that shouldn't. But the fact is, the way we express those things, the way we live our lives should change. I mean, culture changes and people change and trends change. And if we're going to actively speak our story, our message, our incredible truth into the culture, we have to understand how culture changes, and we have to change with it. You know, Jesus was brilliant at speaking the language of his culture. He wasn't churchy, he didn't sound religious, he related to people where they are. And we have to do it today. There's no question that if we can learn how to change our lives and how to stay in step with where the culture is going, we will earn a right to be heard. And people, I think, will be impacted in a much more significant way. The truth is, Christians have experienced disruption since the birth of the early church. The early church was started in the middle of the Roman Empire, and Christians were burned at the stake and thrown to the lions. And it's interesting that every generation of Christians has dealt with something significant, whether it was Dietrich Bonhoeffer and the Nazis during World War II, whether it's Chinese house churches. America, probably our greatest challenge to this generation is distractions. We live in the era of greatest distractions in the history of the world. There are 500 channels on my cable TV at home. We have the web, we have Facebook and Twitter. Our lives are being and hello, the economy in the last few years. So the question is, it's not, are we in this age of disruption? It's how do we live and survive and navigate that world? And so I wrote Jolt specifically to help people understand that we can navigate this period of disruption. It's happened before, we can do it again, and I think actually use it to our advantage. I think it'll make us much more relevant to the culture and our message much more meaningful. So I think it's significant that we don't run from disruption and change, but we embrace it. Everybody tells you need to change, but nobody tells you how to do it. It's funny, your spouse tells you, your doctor tells you, your pastor tells you, your friends tell you, you need to lose weight, you need to make more money, you need to get a better job, you need to find a husband or wife. Everybody tells us we need to change, nobody tells us how. And I'd seen all these books recommending all kind of weight loss and alcoholism and all these things to help people, how to make more money and everything else, but they really don't tell you how. And so I spent 30 years working with companies and organizations helping them change, and so I decided to distill that into 25 jolts, what I call jolts. One of them, for instance, is that you need to learn to embrace the wall. When I was 36, I lived in the Midwest. I had a great job, I had a wife and 2 young children, and I got fired. Totally out of the blue, hit me like a ton of bricks, and I went home devastated. And today, looking back on that, happened almost 20 years ago, I realized it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I got lulled into that regular paycheck, I got lulled into the same old job, and I needed that jolt. So although I was totally upset by it at the time, I realized now I needed to embrace that and realize, okay, that door is shut, and we need to move on. And so sometimes hitting the wall, having no other options, is the best possible option in the world, because it forces, I've just discovered that people won't change if there's any possible way out. If there's any way to keep from doing the diet, if there's any way to do that speaking in front of a crowd, if there's any way out, people will take it. So we've always struggled with change, and I think the church just has to embrace the fact that every generation speaks in a new way. My parents were letter writers, I was an email guy, my daughters are text message people, and that will continue changing. Every generation communicates in a different way, and so it's not something we should be afraid of. It's something we really should embrace if we're going to speak the truth of Jesus Christ into this generation.